And welcome back. You'll see that as we promised in the previous video, we put our patient to sleep by completely removing the battery. And that battery we located on our test bench, and we'll be sure to give it a nice long trickle charge when we go to reassemble everything. Battery is about 4 years old, but it should still have a little bit of life left in it. But if it shows any signs of weakness, we'll go ahead and replace it. But with that being said, and I will splice into this video us draining the radiator. As you can see, we've got the cap off of our coolant reservoir, which is how you get air and purge the air out of these systems. Because if you're familiar with these newer setups, you'll notice there's no radiator cap on the radiator. It's all done through your coolant reservoir there. Obviously, the first thing to do, or usually what I like to do, is now that we have the brush guard out of the way, is start getting this grill out of the way. And then now that we have our coolant drained, we'll disconnect this upper hose here, peel it back, and as we start getting this supercharger out of here, then what we'll do is we'll also start removing the intake that for our air that comes out of our intercooler of our supercharger into our throttle body. We'll get this out of the way. But one thing I wanted to show you on this just little kind of plastic trim they have up here that kind of covers over the top of your radiator, is I find the best way to kind of get these clips off is just with one of these tools here. And these are kind of one of these little Christmas tree clips, if you want to call it, kind of pry tools. And it does a really nice job of being able to get underneath, kind of put the forks of the tool, as you saw there, in the center of that Christmas tree clip, and then just push up. It does a really nice job of getting those clips out without breaking them. You can see here again. And you just go down through the line. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fasteners that just kind of hold this trim piece on. Now the other thing I wanted to show you, now that we have this trim piece off, is when it comes to removing the radiator, I'm sorry, not the radiator, but this front grill that has our Ram logo on it, is that you've got some, and I believe these are 10mm bolts on the top of this piece. And we'll just verify that. And yes, they are 10mm. You've got the 4 bolts there, but you also have some clips that hold the bottom of this radiator cover in place. Now, the light's probably going to swamp this out, so I'll see if I can move that out of the way. I'll kind of tilt that so it's not as blinding. Get a screwdriver here and kind of show you. And if you're looking right where right below the tip of the screwdriver there is where you kind of have a catch that bites hold and holds that bottom of that radiator in place. I'm not radiator, again I keep saying radiator, but that grill in place, along with that clip that you see right here. And what you can normally do is just kind of grab and pull the front corner of this and get this piece to release once you have these top bolts out. But what I usually like to do is that once I have those bolts out, and if you got small enough hands, you can maybe do this a little bit ahead of time, but get those bolts out, come in here with a nice long thin flat tip screwdriver. And generally what you can do once you get underneath this rubber flap here, and you can see the tip of that screwdriver, I usually like to kind of just rock it and wedge it underneath that flat clip a little bit as I pull the front of this, just to help get that clip to release. And the reason why I say that is that, and I've done this before, where I've want to pull this out, you know, nice and straight, and even though I did it without tweaking it at all, it still ended up breaking the bottom one of these clips on a another ram I had years ago and ended up having to glue that clip back on. So there's one thing you want to keep in mind is that when you go to release that clip, again, whether you want to use a screwdriver method or just be extremely careful that when you pull this out, you know, try not to tweak it or twist it from side to side when you do, because you don't want to break that that bottom clip. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and cut the camera at this point. You'll see a little bit of video following this about how we're draining you'll show that how that tube works to help drain the radiator and cut down the mess a little bit. You may even see the kind of bucket down there. And one thing that I'll mention it now, you'll kind of see that hose is still dripping antifreeze into that bucket, and we'll leave that there for a while. Make sure it's nice and drained. Is that when you open up that valve, just as you open the valve and you feel it stop threading out, stop at that point. You don't want to keep going and pull that valve completely out of the radiator. Otherwise, it's going to drain through that big opening you just created rather than your drainage spout. And, you know, yeah, you'll drain the radiator really quickly that way, but it's going to go all over at that point. But we're going to go ahead and cut the video. And we're going to head, like I said, we'll just take off these radiator hoses. We'll get this upper fan shroud out of here. And then we'll start working on getting the belt off and then getting this supercharger head unit out of here. And again, we're going to start disassembly and removing what we can to make as much room as we can to get this taken care of. Now, the one nice thing about working on the truck is that obviously, from what you can see here, is that you have built-in storage. So all the parts that we're going to take off, we're going to lay down here in the bed of the truck so that we don't lose it. And any bolts and other miscellaneous hardware, I like to use gallon Ziploc bags, and I'll show you that. And as we get miscellaneous bolts taken off, we'll put those bolts and other hardware in the bags, and we'll keep that bag with the part that we remove. That way we know where the fasteners are when we go to start putting everything back together. But other than that, I'll cut the video at this point, and I'll bring you back in a bit. And welcome back. Just want to start this video out by showing you that we started to drain out the radiator and the cooling system. You can see that we've got our cap removed from our coolant tank, because on the newer Dodge vehicles, you'll notice there's no radiator cap. So you actually open this up to get air into the system. That way when you crack open your drain valve, as you can, let me grab a light so you can see this a bit better. As we slide underneath again, and you can see we've got our tube installed. We're in the process of draining our radiator now. So again, I highly suggest that if you're going to do this, again, that's 3/8 inch inner diameter tubing, and you may be able to hear all the gurgling happening a little higher up as the system just continues to drain. So it's working out quite well, and we'll bring you back as we get a few more pieces off this beast. Thank you. And welcome back. I wanted to show you that we've got our front grille removed. At this point, we went ahead and took our upper fan shroud off, our air inlet pipe, as well as our filter for our supercharger. And of course, you can see the upper coolant hose is kind of laying off to the side. Now, the procedure for getting my upper radiator shroud out, it's going to be different than yours, because if you remember from a previous video, we're running a modified radiator shroud just because of the clearances we need for this supercharger. But the two bolts on the side that hold the upper part of the fan shroud in are 13 millimeter on either side, and it'll be here on this one, and you'll have one on the exact opposite side. But what I want to show you on this electric fan, obviously not only do you have an electrical piece to this electric fan, but at least on this 2500, even if you push the tabs back here that you can see to get this electrical fan out, one thing that you will run into is on the bottom, like I said, even if you bend those tabs back, it may feel like that electrical fan is still being secured in by a bolt, but in fact, if you can see that there, on the bottom of this one, there's actually a metal C-clip that clips the bottom of the fan to the very bottom lip of this radiator. So you want to make sure that you pull that out, and that way when you hit your two releases there and there on the other side of this electrical fan, you'll be able to get the fan out, and taking this clip out will help keep it from feeling like it's bolted in by something when in fact it's not. But we'll bring it back as we get more of this disassembled. So I wanted to show you real quick this what's called a viscous fan, or I've also heard them called clutch fan, things of that nature. So on these 2500s, as you saw, you have an electric fan as well as this mechanical fan, and these can be somewhat of a bear to break free. Now, I've had this off before, and I've used this same tool to do it. And when we put it back on, we coated it with anti-seize. So breaking it free this go around wasn't too terrible to get done, but I wanted to show you kind of the setup. Back here, you'll see this what's called a, I believe it calls the tool itself is referred to as a OEM adjustable fan clutch holding tool. What I use it for is, and I'll show you this when we get it out of here, is that there's several little points that go through that clutch holding tool that I just thread a couple bolts through so they stick through. And there's some holes in the water pump pulley that I then stick those bolts through, and I'm able to hold the water pump pulley from spinning with this hand. And then with this hand, you can get this tool at pretty much O'Reilly's, Advanced, any auto parts store. It's just a generic fan removal tool. And on a 6.4 Hemi, it's the 35 millimeter end that fits that nut. And it's designed for a 1/2 inch square ratchet. In this case, I'm using a breaker bar with it. And even with holding this steady and putting torque at the end of this nice long breaker bar, it still wasn't enough. So what I was able to do is come in here, and in case you're curious, this is an 1 1/16 wrench. Put it on like this, so that way, and I can show you here, let me straighten this up. When you go to push forward on it, you've got all this additional leverage on that tool. So I'm holding the pulley from moving with this one and using a nice long piece of lever with this tool here. And doing it this way, I was able to get that bolt to break loose. Now, this is a bit of a janky setup, admittedly, you know, so be careful when you're doing this that it all of a sudden doesn't give and everything kind of goes flying out of your hands. And like I said before, we've had this off when we installed the supercharger, and so it made it a little bit easier to remove this time, but it still took quite a bit of leverage and quite a bit of force to get that to break free, but it did break free. So let me get this out of here and show you a little bit better. Again, what this is, it's just a generic tool. It's like I said, you can get it pretty much at any parts store. It's that fan removal tool, and on this one again, it's the 36 millimeter end fits that nut. I'm going to set these down here so they don't get dropped. Pardon the noise, apologies. I'm going to get this holding tool out of here. And again, I didn't use it to hold the clutch, but again, like I said, you got 2 bolt holes at the end of this tool that I just thread a couple small bolts through, and you'll see the hole on the end of the 2 holes on the end of that water pump pulley. So this is able to go into those holes and give me the ability to hold that pulley in place and keep it from spinning. Now, I've seen other individuals break that loose
by just leaving the serpentine belt on and having enough tension in that and using like an air hammer, things of that nature, which you can definitely do if you have that. But in case you don't have it, you are able to break that loose with standard tools. And Scott Rods, who I have a link to his channel in the video below, when he did his timing chain replacement and such, he was able to break that loose by just using a standard hammer and chisel. But just to let you know that it is a bit of a bear, it can be done. And in case you're curious, on this one as well, the way you loosen it is clockwise. So just to show you here, oop, pardon the noise, dropping stuff all over the place, and you'll see that nut actually start to spin off. So this is what I at least have always been told is what maybe it's just a slang term, but always been called reverse thread. Because this does, on this one, and you always check with a specific model, but this one does spin clockwise to loosen. And as you can see there, that gap's getting bigger, and it does spin off. Now you can grab it this way as well because it is on kind of a fluid clutch. You don't have to rotate the whole fan, because you notice my arm is stopping the fan here, and I'm able just to rotate this by hand. Now if you've never removed this before, you may have to kind of wrench that off, but you can see the anti-seize that we put on this last time we had it apart about 3 years ago. And you can see there, it does come off, and having that anti-seize on there, I will tell you, does help. It wasn't nearly as terrible to get that off the second time around. But I'll let it go at this, and I'll bring you back when we get more of this disassembled. But just to show you here that taking this bad boy out of there and the shroud and just a few pieces, you can see how much more room you've got to play with here. Now, one thing we may do is I'm contemplating this about removing this radiator as well, just to give us the extra room to get that cam out. I don't know if it's completely necessary to do it. I'll have to look it up in the book. I haven't seen others remove their radiator to do it, but I may do it because we had the luxury of doing it, and it would just give us just, you know, that much more extra room in case we should need it. But I will let you go as we get more of this tore down, and I'll bring it back. Thank you much. So I wanted to bring you back while we had kind of everything exposed, and we just took the tensioner off of our serpentine belt here. In case anybody was curious, that is our Gates RPM part number that we were running on this belt. Now, obviously with the supercharger in here, since it is driven off the accessory belt, it does change your belt geometry quite a bit. And also the length of the belt on here is longer than a factory belt. But what I wanted to show you is kind of how the ProCharger engineers, again, took advantage of existing mounting points on the engine, and even utilized some of the mounting points that go through existing idlers and the existing belt tensioner and such to get this nice big beefy milled plate in here that the head unit mounts to. Now to be fair, after some redesign work was done with this, and ProCharger was excellent. I had some built issues with it slipping on the power steering pulley, and they actually redesigned where their idlers on this bracket fit, and managed to fix the problem. But it does make for some rather adventurous belt changes. On a typical truck setup where you didn't have this extra beefy plate here, you could just loosen up your tensioner and drop your belt. On this one's a bit more involved. You can see that even with the belt undone, the way it works, it has to kind of creep around these two idler pulleys. One you can see here, one that's a little bit further down this direction that's behind the plate. You actually have to remove the air inlet tube from the bottom of the ProCharger so you can snake the belt around this head unit, loosen up the bolts a little bit to pull it back from the engine, and actually remove this idler here because the belt has to physically go behind it. So like I said, it does make it a bit of a pain to change out this belt, but you got to understand you're adding a third-party supercharger to the front of the engine, and they have designed this actually extremely well. But one of the downsides is, yeah, you get to have a little bit of fun with the supercharger, but along with some of the cost of that is that your belt changes are at least a little bit more involved, unfortunately. Now, it's not the same for all of their kits. It just has to be with, the 2500 being a heavy-duty truck, and they have to deal with the tolerances and the fitments that these trucks come with from the factory. Like I said, it's not a complaint. It's more of a FYI that if you have a 2500 and you're looking at putting a Pro Charger on, maybe they've redesigned this in the 3 years since we purchased it. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But if they haven't, and you're kind of looking at this same bracket setup, just keep that in your mind that your belt changes are a bit more involved. But we're going to finish getting this head unit off of here, and then we'll get it out, and we'll continue to disassemble and bring you on as we can. So we're going to wrap things up at this point. Didn't get too much done on it, and admittedly so, but you can see that this is just my plan for kind of keeping up with the hardware. Is that all like hardware goes in the same bag. I know that what this is for, this is the 2 bolts for the fan shroud. These are the bolts for the front radiator grill, and of course that metal clip that we looked at earlier that attaches the bottom of the electric fan to the bottom of the radiator. But this is my plan for it. I'm just keeping the like hardware in bags just so the bolts don't get up and wander away. This is all the miscellaneous bolts and hardware that bolt the supercharger in place, as well as the belt tensioner and the idler pulley. And you can just kind of see the rest of the parts. We're just slowly accumulating here in the bed of the truck. And I'll bring you back up to the front. And again, we've managed to open up a little bit of space here, and we'll continue to do so. And I've just got some shop towels just shoved in the intake in there, just so that we don't drop anything in it, at least until we can get that intake pulled off. And that'll be the goal for tomorrow, aka the next video, is to concentrate on doing what we need to do to get this intake off of here. And that'll be the kind of the next piece of the elephant, so to speak, that we'll bite off and chew on. Just want to show you here that you're going to see some hardware that's part of the Pro Charger install, and that's where they tapped into the existing vacuum for the system, and one vacuum line goes down to a wastegate on one end of the piping for the supercharger, and the other one just goes to a boost gauge sensor, and the gauge itself is in the cab. Another piece you'll see, which is not standard factory equipment, is the tap into the fuel rail that we have there. Now, what that tap is normally used for is for nitrous systems, because they also need to tap into the fuel rail, and I believe it's to monitor fuel pressure. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me. I'm not a nitrous individual, but because there was no easy way to tap into this fuel rail to put a fuel pressure gauge on this truck, we were able to utilize the same thing like a nitrous system would and run that line over to a sensor. Now, the sensors are electrical. They stay in the engine compartment, and the only thing going into the cab are the gauges. And the reason why we put a fuel pressure gauge on this is that per the Pro Charger manual, they want you to keep an eye on the fuel pressure so that it doesn't drop below a certain pressure for a prolonged period of time. If it does, you're supposed to let off the throttle, let the pressure come back up, and look into getting a more capable fuel pump. So that's why we did that. So as we're kind of doing pulls and such and getting on the throttle, we're able to be mindful of that fuel pressure. But that'll be the game plan for tomorrow. We'll concentrate on getting that upper intake freed, and we'll bring it back, and again, we'll continue to take it piece by piece. We'll catch you later. Thank you much.